The White Book by Makaveli, 1974, Episode 5. The Great Migration continues. On the intro video, I mentioned that the book was 412 pages. What I failed to point out is that 412 equals the 7-day theory because 4 plus 1 plus 2 equals 7. I had to read this chapter twice to fully absorb it. It's amazing how much gets covered in such a small amount of pages. But this is the Jay-Z Origins chapter and is the final of the Great Migration chapters. Character list. I'm doing this one a little bit different than the other character lists. I'm trying to provide some kind of order to how these characters are lined up. So on the Jay-Z family tree, we have Seth Smarter, that's Jay-Z, and it seems to be a play on word or a rhyme of Sean Carter, which is Jay-Z's real name, Seth Smarter. Sean Carter, Seth Smarter, kind of sounds the same. Diane Smarter, Jay-Z's mom. Jack Lilly, JL. If I'm reading it correctly, this is Jay-Z's father. 31 years old in 1969. I could be wrong, but from the way I read it, that's what it sounded like. Florence Smarter is Jay-Z's grandmother. Aaron Prentice Wade, Jay-Z's grandfather. Diane's grandmother, who I didn't see a name there, but that's Jay-Z's great-grandmother. And Mr. Davies is assumed to be the great-grandfather. Then he has some half-siblings. So we have Everett, who's the child of Martin and Diane Smarter. Shirley, another child of Martin and Diane Smarter. Mallory, child of Anthony and Diane Smarter. And then the extended family would be b.i.g, who was Diane Smarter's boyfriend. Martin was Diane Smarter's husband. Anthony was one of Diane Smarter's boyfriends. And Melvin was Florence Smarter's boyfriend. And like I said, I had to read this chapter twice to kind of grasp this lineage, this family tree. And then in the same chapter, we have New Orleans characters from the New Orleans scene. And we have Pamela, Pierre de Louis, he's the head of the Kings. Luna, Lord Ophiscus, Madame Cruzamark, Gypsy, Carlos Marcelos, and the nurse. Character associations. And these are hasty generalizations that I got from these 4 chapters, but the 1971 Tupac origin chapter consisted of revolutionaries, gangsters, and hustlers. The 72 Biggie origin chapter consisted of fashion, acting, hopes and dreams, as well as junkies and crooked cops. The Nas origin chapter consisted of musicians, jazz, the blues, and Islam. And this Jay-Z origin chapter consists of secret societies, failed mothers, intermarital sex, interracial sex, sex orgies, and the interrelationship of whites and blacks throughout time. And I mentioned the previous slide because it reminds me of a Makaveli blasphemy reference. So I brought up the associations on the previous slide because reading all of these chapters, I kept hearing in my head the line by Tupac or Makaveli on blasphemy. My family tree consists of drug dealers, thugs, and killers. And when you research that line on Rap Genius, the website Rap Genius or genius.com, the explanation sounds like something right out of the White Book. And it reads, as an intellectual, Tupac sought to paint a vivid picture of life in America's poor black communities. Tupac often compares and contrasts the lives of the have-nots with those in high society. Pedigree and lineage play a major role in the rich elite's sense of self and definition. Using the image of a family tree, something only the wealthy or typical families use, Tupac shows a different type of family in society, one damaged and flawed by the harsh realities of the ghetto environment. That's a theme that is certainly depicted in the White Book. I would not be surprised if the author of the White Book is also the author of that passage on Rap Genius. That's just my guess. Or listening to Tupac's music, this is obviously describes that. I don't know. But that was a pretty good passage, and I saw a definite parallel between what I read on that website and what I've been reading in the White Book. New York City, Cumberland Hospital, 1969. The scene introduces Diane, Jay-Z's mom. She's in a painful situation. She asks, how the did I get here? Like, how did it all come down to this? Brooklyn, 1949. The question Diane asked on the previous slide is not just a dramatic quote and not just a segue into the next section, but also an historical, rhetorical question of the history of African Americans in the United States. So Diane proceeds. The scene is about Diane discussing with her mother about their roots. And Diane's mother answers as her mother told her, "We lost all of our history and heritage in the holds of the slave ships that brought them over from Africa." And this is something I've heard Tupac and others mention, is that, when you lose your history, you lose your sense of self. And so this scene is the history of Jay-Z's family, his family tree in the United States, at least 5 generations or 4 generations worth. The next part explains who Diane's father was and is. New York State, White Plains, late 1930s. Florence Smarter and Aaron are a forbidden couple who only get to see each other when Mr. Davies goes out of town on business. They think he goes out one night and they get together in the barn, but Mr. Davies comes in the barn pissed off. He confronts them and they wind up killing Mr. Davies. Aaron runs away for his life, and Diane Smarter, Jay-Z's mom, is thus conceived from that interaction. Florence was outcasted after this happened. She takes up with a truck driver named BJ, and they eventually break up. Oblivious white guy learns something. So thanks, Makavelli. Thank you for spelling it out for me. Now, if you could, please explain the definition of ballin'. Brooklyn. Diane meets Martin, and they get married. Martin is away on duty a lot, and Diane becomes a desperate housewife. She starts smoking weed with Anthony. Martin comes home and confronts Diane about her affairs and confesses he also met someone in Hawaii that is more in his league. So they get divorced. Martin keeps the kids. Diane leaves and hooks up with Anthony and then moves back home to Brooklyn with her mom and siblings. Anthony then moves to Brooklyn and they get their own place. Diane takes up cocaine after weed no longer cures her needs. This is kind of like an allusion to gateway drugs. Diane gets pregnant. After the 7th month of her pregnancy, Anthony leaves. Diane sniffs more coke and gives birth to a 4-pound baby. Her mom gets custody, and Diane goes to rehab. Louisiana, New Orleans, Mardi Gras, 1969. Pamela and Diane are hanging out at Mardi Gras. Pamela has friends in secret societies. In the mention of secret societies, my last name, Lippy, and my initials, JL, within one sentence of each other appear. And I was kind of spooked by seeing that. JL, from what I understand, is a black man who is affiliated with I'm assuming a white secret society, and arranges sexual encounters and other arrangements. Tonight he has to arrange one with Luna and Lord Ophiscus, and he isn't pleased because he likes Luna. Or at least he has the hots for her, or lusts over her. Diane goes to see a fortune teller and learns her future. A strange, elaborate sex scene, like out of Eyes Wide Shut, ensues, involving JL, Luna, the Lord, and others. Questionable sex acts occur that will create problems in their near future. After the fortune teller, Diane meets JL, and they have sex. Secret society references: René Le Chateau, the Duke of Orleans, dungeon, surrounded by gardens, groves, moat, Frere Macons, I guess Freemasons, the Valois, the Kings, Heptasophs, never heard that word, Hellfire Club, Modern-day Vikings with the bloodlines of Norse and Frankish royalty. Lipizzan. Royal Dutch ancestry. Bernard Julius Coert Karel Godfried Pieter, Prince of the Netherlands. Prince of Lippe Busterveld. I don't know how to pronounce that. I should. Royal Guards. New York City, Cumberland Hospital, 1969. We are now back to where the chapter began after the history lesson of how did we get here. Diane gives birth to a healthy 10-pound boy. There is tissue covering his left eye, which was a prophecy from the fortune teller. Or was it the left eye and the right eye, the different colored eyes from JL? New York City, 1974. It's Seth's birthday, Jay-Z, and he wants a bike, but there isn't enough money for a bike. So he asks for a Mr. Microphone. Seth Smarter is Jay-Z. The whole chapter was the lineage of how Jay-Z came to be and finishes off at the end where we meet Seth Smarter, Jay-Z, at 5 years of age in 1974. His Wikipedia bio shows that he was born in 1969, and so the math on this is accurate and correct, for that 1974 minus 5 equals 1969. Songs referenced. It was my assumption that the songs referenced had some form of a reason to be there. Everything seems to have a reason in this book, which is what makes it amazing and marvelous. But the songs referenced are Otis Redding, Pain in My Heart, and Aretha Franklin, Save Me. Jay-Z and I believe Kanye West made a song with Otis Redding called Otis. And Jay-Z, I believe, sampled Aretha Franklin on In My Lifetime. So there's a connection between Jay-Z, Otis Redding, and Aretha Franklin. And so thanks to the person that brought my assumption to light on one of the previous chapters. I'll see you in 1975. I peeked ahead, and the 1975 chapter seems to be about Jay-Z again. If you're following along this far and you haven't subbed this channel, or dropped comments, likes, or even dislikes, do your thing to help the cause and boost the visibility and interact in whatever way you feel comfortable with. If you want to find me, I'm on Facebook, Jonathan Lippy, Twitter, @JonathanLippy. I publish a book, Simulation Theory. It's on Amazon. I have an album, Mind Over Matrix, and I roll with the Northern Lights Nation. They got a new album called Filth Out, and they have an album called The Diary of Santa Marta, which it's kind of encrypted, not to the extent of Tupac, but it's got cool riddles involved. So I'll see you in 1975.